August is National Breastfeeding Month, and it got me thinking about the feeding journey that I had with my girls. Next month, I'm going to have a guest on to talk about breastfeeding, but today I wanted to share my personal feeding story. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. Like so many first time moms, I planned to nurse. I had read about all the wonderful benefits, and it really seemed like a no brainer. Like I did in all other areas, I prepared during my pregnancy to do just that. And just like with Addison's sleep journey, nothing went as planned, even though I went in with all the confidence in the world. Part of the reason I wasn't that stressed about the idea of nursing was because my best friend had her first daughter before me, and nursing went really well for her. I felt like most of my friends who had babies before me didn't have any major complications or struggles when it came to nursing. I was already planning ahead for what it would look like when I went back to work when Addison was 12 weeks. The office had moved a refrigerator into my personal office, so I would be able to pump in there and store my milk without even needing to leave my office. I was really ready. But my delivery was not an easy one. After pushing for over 5 hours, Addison finally arrived. But shortly after, I hemorrhaged very badly. I'm not going to lie, this part was particularly scary and it still elevates my heart rate when I think about it. I ended up losing a lot of blood. And once they stabilized me, no one other than my mother, who was there, seemed too concerned. My mom kept commenting on how I'd lost all my color and it wasn't coming back. And over the next 24 to 48 hours, she kept telling them that she'd noticed I had no energy and she'd had four kids. So she seemed concerned. My husband, of course, he's like me. He was new, he wasn't sure, but no one else seemed too worried about it. Addison had a really strong desire to suck and latched on right away. Several of the nurses would come in, sometimes they'd pop their finger into her mouth and they'd say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, she has a really strong desire to suck and strong ability to suck." So everyone thought that was a positive. But by day two, she started to seem fairly unhappy and not overly content with nursing. She would latch on no problem, but she just started to seem agitated. The hospital's lactation team came by many, many times and assured me that her latch was solid and she had strong sucking skills. And they said that we just needed to give my body time for the milk to come in. At no point did anyone bring up the fact that it was possible that because I lost so much blood, that my body may not be able to produce breast milk. Even as we left the hospital 2 days later, they assured me that the excruciating pain I felt every time Addison latched on was totally normal and would pass once my milk came in. At one point, a nurse, not a lactation consultant, a nurse did give me a nipple shield to help relieve that. And if my memory serves, the lactation consultant was not thrilled about that, but it did provide me some relief. So one nurse attempted to help me a little bit, but all in all, they're just saying, give it time. Everything's fine. Everything's normal. It's all going to work out. I went home exhausted from my long delivery, but also I was stressed about the nursing because I could just tell, or something in my gut told me that this wasn't quite right. But I'm a determined person. I've talked about it many times on here. I really thought, okay, I prepared. I'm ready. I'm just going to do all the things because breastfeeding is part of my plan. So I forged ahead with the support of my husband and my mom, who was in town staying with us for a bit. But as the days went by and many calls and in person visits going back and forth to the lactation consultants and to the doctor, we saw the pediatrician, we saw someone in their office to support us with lactation. I started to become fairly distressed about the whole thing because everyone kept telling me that I needed to keep going, even though they would hook me up to the hospital grade pump that they had me rent, and virtually no milk was coming out. I mean, very, very little. I was attempting to nurse Addison frequently per their instructions, and I was attempting to pump. I was waking up to pump with this hospital grade pump, and just nothing was working like they told me it should be. I was taking all the supplements. I was eating what they told me to eat. I was drinking as much as they told me to drink and what they told me to drink. And again, it seemed like nothing was helping. Addison and I were both kind of getting more distraught with each passing day. In some ways, as the days went on, it started to seem like she was getting more distraught with the passing hour. Finally, on day 6, my mom intervened as I was holding my screaming baby, and she told me that it was time to move past just giving her this little small syringe next to my nipple to kind of try to trick her into thinking she was nursing, but yet she was still getting some formula because I wasn't producing well. But it was time to move on to that and to give her a full feeding. And so my mom said, give her a bottle. She had already sent my husband to pick up bottles and to pick up formula as our backup plan. And so that's what I did. With the permission that my mom gave me, I fed Addison a bottle. And I remember just having this urge to cry. And at some point, I don't know if it was that first bottle or as I realized, like, oh, wow, this is really coming to an end. I can remember where I was sitting. I just don't remember exactly how far into this transition. I really did have a good, solid cry. But the good news is Addison stopped crying because she ate and then she was content. And I still continued to try to pump and let Addison work on nursing for another 5 or 6 days before my mom finally convinced me to stop because it had been well over 10 days. It was either, I think we were at either 11, day 11 or 12 when I finally pulled the plug. And I was still literally only getting drops of milk when I was pumping. I never got more than an ounce at any time between both pumping both breasts. So I was not making any progress. And I don't know if Addison on her own was getting much at all. I couldn't even get it out of a typical pump. I had to use this hospital grade pump, which, by the way, you guys, was so painful when there was very little relief. So, I'll preface what I'm going to say next by saying that I have since met many, many wonderful lactation consultants. I'm friends with lactation consultants. I have many clients who have had an amazing, almost life changing experience because of the lactation consultant that guided them. But in my situation, I feel like I was only made to feel like I was giving up and letting my baby down or that I was doing something wrong. The guilt trip was laid on really thick when I decided to throw in that towel on day 11 or 12. And I don't feel this way now, but at the time, with all those postpartum emotions and all my plans not coming together, I felt like this was my first major failure as a mother. I was literally unable to feed my child. This isn't true, of course, because I wasn't a failure and I was able to feed my child. I was able to feed her formula in a bottle. And in fact, there really was reason to be grateful. I did not die during delivery after hemorrhaging. So I was here to enjoy Addison, and Addison had a mother. And I didn't think about it then, but I'm grateful that I was in a hospital and I was able to receive the care I needed after my delivery. And the other reason I could have been grateful or should have been more grateful, or I wish I had thought about, I guess, was that formula exists. Formula was and is an option. And we had the money to buy it. So that wasn't a stressor for me personally. So I wish in that moment I could have reminded myself that fed is best. And better yet, I wish that the lactation consultants would have helped me realize and accept that breastfeeding just wasn't going to be part of my feeding journey with Addison. But those weren't the voices in my head or the message that I was receiving at the time, other than from my mother. I was just extremely disappointed and filled with guilt. That's what I remember about those early weeks, even those early months. I mean, I have no doubt that all that whole process fueled my postpartum anxiety that I experienced. And if you have interest in hearing my postpartum anxiety story, you can listen to episode 29. It was at my 6-week follow-up appointment that my OBGYN pointed out that my milk was probably never going to come in, even if I hadn't pulled the plug, because I had hemorrhaged after delivery and lost so much blood. Why did it take 6 weeks for someone to bring this up, for someone to point this out, for someone to acknowledge that there was probably nothing I could have done differently to change the outcome of our feeding journey? And 18 months later, I was back in the delivery room to deliver Ainsley. And this time, they planned to give me drugs as soon as she was delivered. I'm pretty sure they had to wait until she was out, but they had the IV all hooked up. And I can't remember what they gave me, but they walked me through in advance. They were going to give me these drugs that were going to hopefully prevent me from hemorrhaging again. Unfortunately, like so many things, that didn't go as planned. And while I didn't hemorrhage as badly, I remember everyone being so surprised with how much I guess I did hemorrhage or how much blood I lost, even on those drugs. In fact, I remember as it was kind of starting or they realized, oh, it didn't stop it, like the nurse pulling the doctor into the bathroom for them to come up with a plan because I was so anxious about hemorrhaging again that they didn't want to freak me out. And initially, I wasn't sure what they were talking about because I had the epidural, and so I wasn't feeling everything that was going on. But then I remember them coming out of the bathroom and being like, okay, you're hemorrhaging again. We need to talk this through a little bit. So the good news is I entered that feeding journey with a different mindset. And definitely after hemorrhaging, shifted my mindset to, okay, once again, I may not be able to breastfeed. And so I just continued to tell myself if breastfeeding works, that'll be great. But if not, we're going to be okay. And I actually did end up producing a little bit of milk, never enough to exclusively breastfeed. And I did start to supplement pretty quickly. I think within the first 3 or 4 days when it was clear, yeah, everything wasn't going to kick in like it would in my dreams. I did start to supplement much sooner. But we were able to nurse, or Ainsley and I were able to nurse. And my supply was definitely much more than it was before, but it was not a whole lot. And so I continued to nurse her. I did everything I needed to do to work on increasing my supply and keeping that a priority in the early weeks. And it just didn't really increase. It kind of stayed steady, and we did both nursing and bottle feeding. And then at about 7 weeks, Ainsley decided that she was done nursing. I mean, I'm sure it was a lot of work to get very little, but I actually didn't spend a ton of time stressing out about it. So after a couple of days of her not wanting to nurse and me knowing I'd kind of already done all that I could, I just pulled the plug and we transitioned her fully over to formula. And while I was bummed, I was in a much better place emotionally about this second feeding journey as compared to my first. So, those are the stories of my 2 feeding journeys. And when I look back at that now, my girls are almost 8 and 9.5. I do still sometimes feel that guilt creep in. I like to keep it real around here. And, Addison was diagnosed with asthma when she was 18 months. And while she hasn't had to use an inhaler in over 2 years, from time to time, I find myself wondering if those respiratory struggles could have been avoided if I had been able to nurse. Of course, there's zero benefit for me entertaining this chatter because there's nothing I could have done about it. And I always wonder if I would have had postpartum anxiety as badly as I did if the lactation consultants had been a little more empathetic and supportive. When I think of what an amazing lactation consultant would look like for me, I think it would be someone who does everything in their power and takes all of their training to support me or you in the breastfeeding journey. But it would be someone who also could help me or could have helped me or could help you decide if that breastfeeding journey is not going to work out. Help you decide if it's time to look at alternative options. It would have been helpful if they were trained or intentional about helping me shift to another option. I think it'd be awesome if lactation consultants could help educate moms on donor milk options and what that looks like and what we want to think about as we evaluate that option, and or help me or another mom choose a formula and what do you want to think about when it comes to that, because I'm going to be honest, in all my stress I didn't think about any of that. It was like, just give me a formula, off we go. It's just such a, once I failed at the nursing, it was formula and that was it. And I didn't honestly spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I kind of wish I had. And I'm sure there are amazing lactation consultants that do those things, but that wasn't my experience. And I wish it had been. So if I could turn back time, or I guess if I could share advice with a mom who would be interested in my thoughts on how to set yourself up for success on a feeding journey, the biggest thing I wish I had done and that I would advise a friend of mine to do would be to find the ideal lactation consultant, someone with the traits that I just mentioned, in advance of delivery, to have that person teed up to guide you from the get-go and to be able to help you make these critical decisions, because sometimes it doesn't matter what we do, it's not all going to work out the way we hope it did. I support a lot of new moms in my newborn sleep program, Have Baby Needs Sleep, and there's a lot of discussion around feeding journeys. And I've had this group for years now, so it's a constant. Every week there are discussions around feeding and how that's going and what it looks like, because it all connects into sleep. And while I'm 100% supportive of breastfeeding and all the wonderful benefits that come with it, and I'm always encouraging it for the moms who want to take that route in the group, I also really focus on fed is best. And I and we as a community really keep maternal mental health as a very top priority, because sometimes the feeding really plays into that aspect. Feeding and sleep, they both play into that aspect big time. And so I always kind of hold that as a key pillar in the group as moms are talking about this and supporting each other along their feeding journey. I think this is something just as friends that we can do for each other. We can encourage the moms in our lives along through their breastfeeding journey if it's going well or challenging or they're overcoming hurdles. But we can also support moms who choose not to breastfeed at all or struggle big time on their journey or simply can't breastfeed for whatever reason. There's so many reasons. It could be medical, like mine. It could be because of the time they have to return to work. There's just so many reasons that it's not going to work out for some moms. In the coming weeks, I'm going to have a formula technician on to discuss all things related to formula and bottles, which I think will be very interesting. I have a lot of questions, all the questions I never asked when my kids were little. So keep an eye out for that episode. But please know that if you are having or had a wonderful feeding journey with your baby, I'm absolutely thrilled for you. And if your journey is or was a struggle, please know that you are not alone. And you are also doing a great job and you're a great mom. And I hope that you can slap away any guilt that rises up around this topic. Thanks for joining me again here today. This motherhood journey is full of so many expected and unexpected twists and turns. And I know that I benefit from hearing other people's stories because it helps when I can kind of see myself or relate to their story, because then it doesn't feel so lonely. So, for those of you who can relate to this story, I hope that you found it helpful. And I hope, as always, that you will join me again next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.